Now that we've heard Volvo Group's perspective and Honda's vision, we're moving to the startup side. We're specifically one that addresses the challenges that these OEMs and other global manufacturers are creating, so to speak, by boosting the EV production lines. So how will the city and states support this massive transition to electric vehicles? Will millions of miles of roads across the world turn over the coming years or decade into power sources for millions of EVs? Charlie Levine, Sales and Marketing Officer at Electreon, will share with us some answers to these large-scale, troubling global challenges.
Thank you, Daniel, for the introduction. I'll just share my screen with you now, and we can begin. Can you all see?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, great. So yes, as Daniel mentioned, EVs and the grand shift that is happening right now is incredibly important, and of course we support it. But this shift is happening so quickly that there are numerous challenges associated with it, and that's what we here at Electreon are focused on, helping to solve some of those challenges. So the first one, pretty obvious when we think about it, it really is surrounding the batteries themselves. We know that they're still large, heavy, and expensive, particularly when we're looking at the scale of fleets. It's one thing to have a battery for an individual vehicle, but when we're looking at fleets the size of London, for example, London's bus operator, the Transport for London, has 9,000 buses in their fleet. So huge scale problems there. We know that there's massive degradation, as Reid also touched upon, of the battery itself, and we're experiencing short first life, which is something we hope to solve. And there are challenges surrounding the resources required for the batteries themselves. And of course, we're still missing an end-of-life pollution and recycling solution that is holistic and really deals with the problem itself. But the batteries are only half of the challenge. The second half, the second half is around the infrastructure itself. I want to share with you our personal experiences here at the company. So I'm in an interesting debate, let's call it, with the people that live in my building, all of my neighbors, and the management company of the building. I'm yet to receive approval to have my charging station for an EV, and I've been waiting for quite a long time now. Oren, our CEO, has managed to get approval from his neighbors and from the building itself, but his charging solution is causing blackouts, energy blackouts, and of course he's no longer everybody's favorite neighbor. And another colleague of ours lives in central Tel Aviv, which, like most cities in the world, really struggles with parking spots. And Itai, our colleague, has no access to parking. So even if he wants to buy an EV, and he does, what's his solution there without having his own private charging solution? And I haven't even begun to discuss the issues surrounding public and shared modes of transportation, commercial fleets, and the trucking industry in itself. You know, we're looking at real issues here surrounding each individual vehicle requiring its own charging unit. I mean, let's think about that for a moment. For the city of Tel Aviv, or any other city, in fact, imagine 300,000 plus charging stations or solutions that are implemented all over the city. Well, first, I can't imagine that the city here or any other municipality would allow such intrusion into the city itself. But let's assume for a second that that was allowed. Well, there'd be complete chaos everywhere. Our cities are already packed. There's already limited real estate for people to walk and cycle in the city. So it just seems like we're heading down a trajectory that's going to surmount to a lot of chaos. And that, combined with the complicated and expensive grid connections that we require for all of these EVs at scale. But we believe that there's a different approach to take. We believe that we can leverage our existing infrastructure, and it can be part of the solution to expedite EV adoption across all sectors, hopefully eliminating road chaos and doing it in the most sustainable way possible. We want to introduce to you our system, an electric road system, and what it enables is continuous, regular charging, which will enable massive reduction in battery size and extends the battery's first life. It empowers an essentially 24/7 driving experience, no need to stop, particularly important when we think about autonomous vehicles and the shift that's likely to take place in the coming decades. And we're enabling more benefits for the end customer, ultimately. We're reducing the total cost of ownership and operation, which again is particularly important when we're looking at fleets. We're eliminating driving range anxiety, and for commercial fleets or the trucking industry, we're increasing carrying capacity because of the reduction of battery. And more importantly, for the cities themselves or for the region that is, there's no visual impacts whatsoever. So a little bit more about the technology itself, just in a high level. It's dynamic wireless charging. It's powered by energy transfer from copper coils installed just under the asphalt road surface, which is connected to the receiver unit under each vehicle. This system is modular, so for one individual vehicle, it would be one receiver, and of course there's a scale-up approach for buses and for trucks. The entire system is intelligent, completely invisible, and it enables a shared charging system. So we can have multiple users using the road at the same time, all receiving their charge, which is great for scaling. And it mitigates that first issue that we talked about with individual charging solutions for every vehicle of every type. And the system's managed by a mobility and energy management platform, managing the charging in an optimal way. Now I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about the projects that we've implemented in the last 2 years and some of our learnings from them. So our first project is in Gotland in Sweden. The Swedish government has a national electrification plan. They want to mitigate their national emissions and to reach their targets by implementing electric roads. They have a goal of reaching 3,000 kilometers by 2030. And so far we've been involved in the deployment of 1.65 kilometers of road in Gotland on a small island. So what we've learned is we can create a generic platform. We've implemented our receivers on an electric bus, on a 40-ton truck, and Zoe Renault. I remind you, these are all different batteries with different charging requirements and all on the same road. So this receiver installation was very quick. We actually worked together with Volvo Workshop and integrated our first receiver ever in just 1 week. And of course, we can expedite that time. And we allow easy integration with in situ distributed renewables. You can't quite see it in this photo, but there are solar panels integrated on site in this location. And fundamentally, we've been able to demonstrate and hopefully prove that we have the potential to reduce battery capacity and costs by up to 90%. For our hometown, Tel Aviv, we want to demonstrate that we have wireless dynamic charging that will enable a city to operate a 24-hour bus service, meeting the final needs of the customer, of the citizens of Tel Aviv. So we're showing that continuous and regular charging enables more trips per vehicle per day, as there's no need to stop to charge. There's no driver intervention whatsoever. So if you think about it on the individual level, plugging in your electric vehicle is slightly irritating at best. If you're looking to scale of 100, 500, 1,000, or in the case of London, 9,000 individual vehicles in the fleet, it's not only impossible, it's additional hassle for it's so much hassle for the end user there. We're looking at a full-time job of a full-time team just to plug in and unplug or connect the charging systems. And finally, we learned that there are no grid limitations. We're utilizing the existing connections and the transformers, which also enables speedy authority approvals, which is essential for our scaling. And finally, I'd like to talk to you about our mixed charging solution in Germany. So we're offering point-to-point e-bus shuttle, as is demonstrated here on the right. It's in the Karlsruhe region, and it's connecting the EMBW training center to the local transport network there. So we've learned that there's no need to electrify the entire route. We can electrify sections of the bus route or of the road itself to provide an optimal charging solution. We can provide a mix of dynamic and semi-dynamic charging, which best utilizes the downtime of the driver. So if we think about the example of the bus turning around at the end of its route or the driver taking a short break, we can provide the semi-dynamic or even the static charging solution there. And we've learned that our semi-dynamic solution is also ideal for other use cases. For example, taxis queuing at train stations or airports waiting for passengers. And this brings me to my next point, where what we've really learned is that in order to provide a full and holistic solution, we need to create a system that's optimal and flexible for every user, every type of user that's involved. So we've talked about dynamic, of course, it's our holy grail, which enables infinite and continuous driving. I touched upon the example of the taxi queues for the slow moving vehicles. And for stationary charging at bus terminals, for example, or at the end of the routes, or at the depot, or for other vehicles, parking lots, we're able to provide all three. So a little bit more about us. Our vision is to electrify roads and empower more EV adoption. We want to enable more people to buy more EVs. And we believe that the right way to do that is to minimize the battery size and to offer regular and consistent charging at regular intervals. When we think about electric road systems' additional value, it really is about alleviating charging uncertainty for the end user, decreasing total ownership costs across all sectors, and most importantly, reducing transport emissions. So research conducted by our partners at the Swedish Transport Authority indicates that we are not on a path to reach our emissions targets. And the only way we can do that is thinking about alternative technologies. And they believe that ERS is a big part of that, hence why they have an electrification plan for 3,000 kilometers by 2030. Additional values or additional benefits when we think about ERS is that, well, it's autonomous vehicle ready, as I mentioned earlier, and it complements EV charging solutions. We don't need to push other players out of the market. There's a huge puzzle here for the EV scaling, and we see ourselves as part of that puzzle. And finally, we're looking for more OEM collaboration. We want more auto industry partners. And to that end, we want to license our receivers to you for free. So very much like Reed, this is my contact email. Thank you very much for listening. And if you see an opportunity for us to partner or collaborate, then please don't hesitate to be in contact.
Thank you very much, Charlie. I think talking about the puzzle, this is a great way to connect the dots or the puzzle here. So we have large scale challenges which are unstoppable, powered by or expedited by the EV visions and manufacturing power of Volvo Group and Honda and many other OEMs, of course. One very promising solution here by Electreon. So we've heard that, and now it's time for the Q&A session. For those asking questions, feel free. Just open the microphone, state your full name and company name, indicate who the question is meant for. Charlie, Reed, or David, and the floor is open as of now.
Daniel, hi, it's Itai from DRIVE TLV. I have a question. It's related to Reed, Honda, and David from Volvo Group. Are you preparing, or if you're preparing differently to the addressing of the massive demand for EV in China, comparing to the EU and the US? And if so, how you do it?
And do you want to start, Reed?
Yes.
Sure. Yes. Sure.
Go ahead,
So we definitely see the Chinese market as incredibly attractive and different. It's very much a unique market in many ways and presents a unique challenge as a result. So I showcased one of our models that's upcoming that is specifically targeted for the Chinese market. That will be a fully electric SUV or crossover concept. So we have essentially a separate operation in China with that is obviously wholly owned by Honda, but it essentially operates as a separate company that is dedicated to developing products for the China market, that is focused specifically on energy products as well as a high priority, that is developing products and energy services for the Chinese market, and we have local production as well. So we have tried to lay the groundwork for, I guess, a strong performance and foothold in the Chinese market, which we do see as a major contributor to our electric vehicle sales and adoption, and potentially a leader in that market as well, or in that adoption. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Thanks, Reed.
Yeah. Some comments from David here in Volvo. So yeah, we have a joint venture with Dongfeng Motors in China. Obviously, China is an enormous and important market, and they are far when it comes to electrification. I mentioned the pioneer with hybrid buses in Europe and Latin America, but there are many battery electric vehicles in China. So we are working in the JV, and that roadmap is in a way, I mean, it's part of the Volvo Group, but we are driving it from different perspectives and different market needs, and we are very much focusing on the European and US market as of now. We will take it stepwise, but that is the interface we have.
Okay, great. So thanks, Reed. Thanks, David, for sharing that with us. Thanks, Itai. Any other questions for Charlie or for David or Reed?
I have a question for Charlie. Hi, this is Ben from Honda Innovations. Charlie, you have a specific region where market traction is looking good, or is pioneering the interest in your technology. And I wonder, is it only government and regulation driven, or more public / partnership, commercially wise driven?
Thank you for your question, Ben. I would say that we have a solid mix of interest. So across different regions, across North America and Europe, actually we're seeing a lot of interest in Asia and Africa as well. No, we're seeing interest from different OEMs, all of the different players actually across our stakeholder group. So interest from energy and grid companies, interest from governments and municipalities, interest from fleet operators, interest from all members of the value chain.
Let me be more specific. In the specific countries where you already deployed your technology, infrastructure-wise, obviously not commercially, but advanced piloting, this is driven, sponsored, and partnered with governments, municipalities, or more than that?
Driven by direct partnerships with municipalities, with local and regional governments, and of course a strong will from our side.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
I have a question for Charlie as well, just to piggyback on that. What would you say is the biggest challenge or risk to achieving your technology vision?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I'm trying to think of one particular one. Of course, there are many challenges in this. I think it's about capturing the window of opportunity that we're in. It's about getting all of the stakeholders that are involved in the process. You know, I mentioned a few in my last answer. There are so many different stakeholders across so many different cities, regions, and countries that we need on board for this. But we're very pleasantly surprised to see the initial interest and the collaborative spirits of many cities, particularly if they have innovation departments or OEMs with innovation departments like yourself. So that's it's the challenge and also the opportunity in itself.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Reed and Charlie. Any other questions? Although Honda is taking over the questions part.
Hey, Charlie, this is Raymond here from Honda again. Sorry for risking Honda taking over that statement here, but I do have an interesting question because I see this as actually very, it works out well that it's going to be huge. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be all over different geography, all over different cities, but also there are going to be more competitors, maybe putting different stretches of road that have different infrastructure that are very similar, or maybe some sort of compatibility. How do you in a business perspective, how do you tell what car is charging on by which road? How do you do this billing, right?
Yes, of course. So I mentioned in my presentation charging as a service as the solution that we ultimately want to provide. So that means a management system, smart mobility as a service, charging as a service, however you want to call it, but a management platform that's able to identify which vehicle from which fleet, or in the case of a private user, which individual is on which road at which time, how much energy they're consuming, and ultimately how much they need to be charged for that consumption. But it goes a little bit beyond that. We're envisioning a future where if we have an entire fleet, let's take the example of a bus fleet, because it's one that I'm very familiar with, and I'm sure you all are too. There will be different requirements at different times, right? There'll be one bus that its state of charge is particularly low, and it needs an extra top up and maybe needs to be prioritized over an additional user. So that's something that is in our product roadmap, and hopefully where we're going towards the shift in EVs.
Yes, okay, so just to follow up quickly, so my question is the only information, well, not only, but the sole information that you get from the system would be the receiver in the bus on the car, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but does the road talks to the car as well?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I debated whether or not to include a slide that shows every component, and I wasn't sure whether or not to, but there is the receiver unit, there's the charging technology in the road. That connection and that relationship is managed by a management unit. And then there's the additional SaaS technology that I mentioned that manages the relationship and the fleet orchestration for metering, monitoring, and charging.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for
Charlie, I have a question here, David, from Volvo. When
Yes.
it comes to the dynamic chart, very interesting. Appreciate the presentation. I mean, dynamic, semi-dynamic, and static, conductive, or inductive, there are different pathways. You mentioned the interoperability being a very important part of this. I mean, to scale up, it needs to be interoperability. How are you, when it comes to the technology on board different vehicles? I mean, how do you look upon to standardize that? Well, I believe in the end of the day, we need a standard.
Yeah. You're completely right. We do need a standard, but we're not. Yeah. You mentioned there are a few other companies who are in the game. It's no secret we're not the only players with wireless charging, specifically dynamic wireless charging. We are the only company who's been able to prove their technology on the road itself with conductive charging. With wireless dynamic charging. And I think when we start to see more players come on board, and we're in tight collaborations with more OEMs, and we have the additional support of the European Union and the standards authorities and agencies across the world. In the short term, that's where we're heading for the standardization, to be completely interoperable. It requires more players than just us involved in the process. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey Charlie, this is Vishnu from Volvo. I have a question as well. Thanks for the presentation. It was really good. I mean, you mentioned about some interest in Africa and the other parts of the developing world, and it just got me thinking, do you actually see a sort of attraction there? Because it could be that in a lot of those countries, they're building the infrastructure now, as opposed to say Europe or the US, where you would have to sort of dig up existing infrastructure to put something in. And at the same time, you're talking about 90% potential of reducing battery cost by 90% because you don't carry so much batteries. So it could be like a good mix of the infrastructure is being put in, and then the products are probably much more less expensive, which could be more affordable in those markets. Do you actually see that strongly?
Yes, yes, we do. We see a very good split of interest from different authorities and governments across the world. Actually, it's a pretty even split. And yes, we completely agree. You know, when we think about how can we achieve maximum impact, the maximum impact would be in the developing world, where we have countries and cities with extreme levels of pollution from the vehicle emissions and from other factors, of course. So yeah, we're totally looking at that market, and we're seeing big interest. Just to touch upon your point about the infrastructure being created or deployed for the first time, yes, it's definitely you know, an additional easy benefit if we could collaborate with the local infrastructure companies developing and implementing the roads, so we can work together and deploy them. But what I didn't talk to you about is how easy our deployment actually is on existing road architecture. We can deploy up to 1 kilometer with a small team per night. And that, of course, can be scaled up. And our technology, the copper coils themselves, they're only 8 centimeters embedded in the road. So the process of you know, inserting and deploying the infrastructure itself is not so much of a change and not so challenging as you might think. But definitely right about the point of partnering with authorities and with agencies as they build infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vishnu, and thanks, Charlie, for taking so many questions. I'll have another question. Somebody, a question for David or for Reed, challenge them, please. If not, I will.
If not, I will.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Bring it on.
Reed, this one's for you. Talk to me, or talk to us a little bit more about your hydrogen. Sorry, David,
Yeah.
This one's for you. Other way, sorry. This one's for you. About the hydrogen. What are the challenges, the major challenges that you see there, and how is Volvo working to figure out those challenges?
In the plan I shared there with the electrification map, you have fuel cell electric vehicle. Fuel cell electric vehicle is an electric vehicle. Mm-hmm. Instead of batteries, you have you do in fact have a battery, but a smaller one and a different one, and a fuel cell stack. And you may have heard about the initiative we have taken with Daimler to develop the fuel cell stack and the fuel cell development as such, which is an important statement that you know, for the longer, really demanding long haul. We see the hydrogen electric vehicle being the right technology. There are many challenges for sure to be able to scale up and mass produce, to take care of the heat and so forth. So there are a number of challenges really to take it from passenger cars up to commercial vehicles, and the size of fuel cell stack. But also to integrate it, you know, to create you know, a good complete system solution where you take care of the energy in the right. I hope that gives a flavor to your question. Yeah?
Yes, thank you.
We have a lot of experts that can talk further about the hydrogen technology if you are following.
Thanks, David. Anybody else, a question? We have a few more minutes. I'll ask David a question, and if somebody, they can keep the last one. So, David, who will be the last vehicle, the last machine within Volvo Group, commercial vehicle fleet, to join this shift? Is there a year after which Volvo will no longer hold or manufacture non-electric engines? I'm talking about, again, commercial vehicles. So which one will be the last?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. Thanks. And longer and heavier becomes more and more challenging, I would say. And we need to bear in mind that decarbonize doesn't mean that we will, you know, electrify everything. You know, within commercial vehicle and for the really demanding long haul, we still will have products with you know, combustion engines for many years within commercial vehicles. But they will be fueled with something different than diesel. So it is a very good question, and doesn't make sense really to speculate too much. But to decarbonize and to go with a vision that I share doesn't mean everything will be electric. So you will see, you know, combustion engines many years to come within commercial vehicle in different areas. And there are a lot of very exciting and challenging technology to be developed, you know, there as well. It's a good one.
Okay. Yep, a challenging one. Thanks. It's an interesting. We'll stay tuned.
Yeah.
Reed, on your side, I'm moving that question in your end. Are the legacy Hondas, okay, the Accords of the world, the Civics, going this transition soon? Are we seeing also a general shift also to the legacy models?
Absolutely. So there are plans currently, several of which have been announced, to electrify much of the lineup if it's not already electrified. So currently, a number of these models you mentioned, like Accord, already have a hybrid powertrain option, and they will that option will expand, continue to expand throughout the range. And the goal is to have, as I mentioned, 2/3 of all sales be electrified within the next decade. And it will be a combination of kind of bringing electrified powertrains to existing models, and then developing and selling new models to, built from the ground up to be electrified, fully electric or plug-in hybrid or fuel cell. And of course, like David mentioned, we're kind of looking for new and creative ways to leverage our past work in fuel cell R&D, whether that's for consumer cars or for other applications. But the idea is to bring these emissions reduction technologies and zero emission powertrains throughout the product line, including legacy products.
Okay, great, thanks. Good news from that side. We have one last question coming before we wrap up. Kent?
Hi everyone. This is Kent Lucas with DRIVE and also with Next Gear Ventures. To all of you quickly, Charlie, it seems like working with the public sector and municipalities and governments are key to your success. So maybe elaborate, how do you think about that? And then to Honda and Volvo, how do you think about partnering with those entities in working with someone like Electreon? Thank you.
Great question. So we think about it in stages. We think about the onboarding process and implementing a pilot in a small section of road, offering value from day one. It's very important that people are able to see, well, not the technology, there's nothing to see, but to see the value and to see how the system works, and to ultimately optimize the road itself. So if we implement on one stretch of road, we would usually choose a road in a city where as many of the public buses or the public shuttles are passing through as possible. So we're able to provide the most amount of value as easily and quickly as possible. Then, you know, we'll get to the stage where they see the value, and we think about the process of scaling up. You know, I mentioned that it's a shared platform. So the goal is to implement in a way that enables the most amount of users possibly to use the platform. That's in 10 seconds, an explanation.
Great.
In my opinion,
I can comment, David here, Volvo, and you know, we believe in the fact that in the end of the day it needs to be a standard, and to be able to deliver standard, we need to collaborate and so on. We have been involved in a couple of ERS initiatives throughout the years, and you know, we see a continuous interest to learn more and listen more and you know, pick the ones that makes most sense. So I would certainly contact you, Charlie, to learn more about what you have shared today.
And from our side, I think the pilot approach that Charlie described is exactly the right way that we are thinking about it as well. The idea of delivering value from day one and delivering a proof point that can demonstrate the technology in physical action in the real world better than any pitch deck or description could do it. That's how we typically love to engage with these new and very ambitious technology ideas, especially ones where there's an infrastructure requirement or there's it requires buy-in of other third parties like governments and municipalities. So to have that proof point and to have a way for us and our engineers to engage very easily to see the value brought by the technology without having to, I guess, take a large amount of risk or upfront effort on the part of our engineers. That's of enormous value to us when it comes to evaluating new technologies and new ideas. So that's exactly the right way that to be thinking about it in our opinion.
Thank you. Thanks, Kent, for the question. Thank you, Charlie, David, Lee, for all the answers in the discussion. We'll stop here. Holidays are coming, so we need to wrap up. We hope that the speakers today enable everybody here to have a better understanding of the realm of electric vehicles. We try to collect as many perspectives as possible on this topic so we can all deepen our understanding about the subject which, well, by definition, will impact the entire mobility industry or the entire world. To be more commercial, private, public fleets will soon be riding the streets silently. Amen. I think it's a pretty amazing thought, and we'd like to present it as kind of DRIVE's version of this year or coming decade's resolution. Stay tuned for the next events in 2021. Happy holidays, everybody, and best regards.
Thank you everyone for participating. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Bye.